Great. Now I think let's open up the questions to you in the audience and also online. So let's hear some questions.
I'm Stephen Gilman from the School of Public Health. So I have a question for all three of you. It seems that one thing our society has been really good at lately is inventing new forms of toxic stress and new sources of toxic stress. For example, cyberbullying might be a new form of toxic stress, or the economic meltdown and the impact of foreclosures on families might be a new source of toxic stress. So both from the science end and the policy end, my question is whether our scientific infrastructure is good enough and adaptive enough to identify these new forms and sources of toxic stress. And from the policy end, is our public health infrastructure and surveillance system, like we have for new bioterrorism, for new biological sources of health problems, set up to identify new forms of toxic stress?
Take it away.
I'll be glad to start. So I thank you for the question, Stephen, because it, first of all, is an opportunity to clarify what we mean by what toxic stress is. And so toxic stress could be caused by lots of things, and as you've pointed out, societies will continue to come up with ways to make life difficult for some, and maybe better for others. I don't know. The thing about toxic stress that's really important is that toxic stress is what's going on in our bodies, regardless of whether the cause is being left alone and ignored, being bullied, being a victim of terrorism with nobody to make you feel safe. The toxic stress is the kind of final common pathway, and it's what's happening inside the body. So what that means is that the answer to whatever new causes of toxic stress might come are the same old-fashioned answers to the old causes of toxic stress. It's for children. It means having adults who are there to help children get through, to help them feel a sense of safety, feel a sense of protection, and most important from an intervention point of view, begin to build their own capacities to be able to deal and cope with stress. And that's part of the adaptation phenomenon of biology, right? And so I think this is why it's such a powerful concept, is that when you come right down to it, the answers are not complicated conceptually. It's like you look at a situation and say, these children are in trouble because there is no sense of buffering and protection around them that's going to be there day after day, week after week. And how do we build that? So some of it focuses on programs that are actually working with families and kids. But some of it could really be much more from a public health perspective and from a community perspective is how are we building protective mechanisms in communities where cyberbullying and all kinds of other things are now new phenomenon. How's the community going to kind of helping families buffer kids against that? And in the end, everybody ends up benefiting because everybody ends up getting the result of a healthier, more competent next adult population. So it's the beauty of this is conceptually it's very simple. The challenge is how do we do that? That's the question where I think we have to look at our existing policies and programs and say, how do we start with the best of what we have and think of that as the place to start? And what can we build new on top of that? And how can the science lead us to some new ideas? Because what we do right now obviously isn't enough for a good part of the population for whom the stresses overwhelm what our programs are doing.
I think in the street that the problems are more acute, that your existing institutions are being cut back. I mean, you cut back the counselors in schools, you cut back the special needs person in the schools. Your not-for-profit agencies are doing more with less. They've got stress. So it's not so much what more can we do? How can we protect what we have and make it better? Or is what Roberta, you're saying, how do you make it more efficient?
Thank you for taking my question. Julia Koehler, infectious disease staff at Children's Hospital Boston. As a pediatric clinician and a molecular biologist, I appreciate the magnitude and importance of the paradigm shift that Dr. Schoenkoff and his colleagues supported by the AAP have developed to give us a framework to understand the impact of eco-bio-developmental influences on the child as they shape the trajectory of the life of the adult. In my clinical practice, I have become familiar and deeply concerned about the situation of families with undocumented parents, parents with undocumented immigration status. At present, there are about 5.2 million children in families with an undocumented parent. And the pediatric literature, as well as the sociology, public health, education science literature, tells us that these children have unexpectedly good outcomes in terms of behavioral issues, in terms of low incidence of violent behavior, in terms of health issues like low birth weight or premature birth. So apparently they live within situations where their toxic stress is buffered by supportive, continuously present adults. Toxic stress perhaps generated by poverty, discrimination, difficult housing situations, etc. However, what I have come to understand and what has really greatly concerned me is the fear that these children are living in these days since the mid-2000s and greatly accelerated since 2008, where their parents are at greatly accelerated rates being arrested and deported for their immigration status alone. And actually, in the first 6 months of 2011, 46,000 children, U.S. citizen children, lost a parent in that way.
We need your question.
My question is, in this paradoxical situation where where the toxic stress actually consists in loss of the pre-existing stable, supportive parental and adult relationship, what is our responsibility as pediatricians? And this is a question to both panelists. And what is the responsibility of the politics who make these policies?
Let's start with the politics of that. So, Roberto, I'm going to throw that to you.
Sure. I appreciate the question. I think we have an obligation to be sure that we put the welfare of our children and their development and well-being first and foremost as immigration enforcement actions are carried out. I think you've touched on a really important point, and this is something we're unfortunately seeing where in some of our schools as well as some of our early childhood programs, we're even beginning to see a chilling effect based on some local policies and some state policies even that seek to require demonstration of legal status and end up being a chilling effect for families to actually seek out the support that they need for their children to be able to be successful. So, excuse me, we're trying to do more to make sure that our families all know the rights that they have to access a free public education. All of our immigrant families. This is a right that's affirmed by the Koehler versus Doe ruling under the Supreme Court, and our administration has issued some new guidance on that to really provide a tool for school districts and families. I think in the context of enforcing existing immigration law, we need to really be sure that we're being thoughtful about bringing in all of the support systems for our kids in terms of their welfare and their well-being. so that we can minimize the disruption and make sure that we have an all-hands-on-deck approach with our existing social service network at the federal level, with state and local authorities, and with community-based organizations. Faith-based organizations can provide an important role here too, to make sure that the well-being of our kids is not disrupted, because it's a real issue, I think, that you touch on that we've heard about from around the country. And our Department of Health and Human Services has been looking at this issue and what we can do to follow up and working in conjunction with ICE.
Thank you. Thank you.